Kirtanaya Pitaro Kamalaya Daksho Vishwambaro Nijaro Jugadharma Pado Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sarito Garadai Pushpavanto Chitra Sando Tamonudo Vandeham Shri Krishna Abhaya Charanastho Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Sudapriya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikanta Radha Bhakta Kanchan Gaurangi Radhe Tavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suderi Pranamami Hari Jai
Good evening. We've been discussing four lila with the specification of four community for the last few days, and continue that. As you may recall, last night we spoke at some length about Chaitanya sannyas, and that with regards to how it fits into the overall picture of his lila, with emphasis on Navadvip as the abode to obtain, and his sannyas lila, which takes him out of Navadvip, as the means to which to enter there, among other things. So, to begin, last night we mentioned the incident that is describing all of the principal biographies of Mahaprabhu, Vrindavan Das, Murray Gupta, the original text written during his life, Chaitanya Bhagavat afterward, and later, of course, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, also in Kavi Karnapur's work, Sri Chaitanya, what is it? Chandaya Nataka drama. So it's one of the events that is mentioned everywhere, and thereby, historically speaking, has more credibility. And that incident, of course, we didn't go into detail about it, but we mentioned it in the brief. That being that in his teaching of Sanskrit grammar that he continued after being initiated by Ishwar Puri and returning back to Bengal. Although he continued it, his teaching was different. He was transformed considerably by the influence of Ishwar Puri. He became a Vaishnava now. To the joy of all the Vaishnavas of Navadvip were the only people in Navadvip who had a grudge with him, who were disappointed with him because they thought he was so qualified. He would love him. We can't say that because he's wasting his life. We have to tell him that he was punditry and not embracing the Yuga Dharma. Of course, when they did embrace the Yuga Dharma, then they really had a champion of their cause on their side. So his teaching was different, and it became confusing to some of the students. This is, of course, the Prakat Lila, manifest Lila. The manifest Lila, be it War Lila or Krishna Lila, we've talked about the connection between the two at some length over these days. Both are manifestations of the lila within time and space, obviously, but they are somewhat analogous to the sadhaka deha. Sadhaka deha means the practitioner's body. Practitioner's body is a kind of a work in progress, if you will. Our body is, physically speaking and psychically speaking, as much as we think of it as possessed of six senses, including the mind, is an identity, a body that is as through the senses we interact with the object of the senses, with what's out there, if you will, then this fosters and gives rise to an identity. What I like and what I don't like, what I think is good and bad, and so forth, that distinguishes me in respects from another. So, of course, the idea is Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti, which is like, this is bhakti. That when with our senses, rather than serving them in the identity that is fostered out of pursuing sense objects for the pleasure of the senses, we use the senses in connection with sense objects in our sadhaka deha for the pleasure of Krishna. So Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchti. This is bhakti, right? And so it stands to reason that as much as an identity, appreciate the point that we have, is arising out of our likes and dislikes, that which makes me and you different or alike to whatever extent, and those likes and dislikes are arising out of our sense perception in relation to sense objects. I like this one, I don't like that one. I see it this way, I think about it that way, and so on and so forth. Our personality, if you will, material personality is derived, and it arises out of this. So it stands to reason, as I say, that if we should bring the senses in touch with sense objects with express purpose of serving thereby through that the senses of Krishna, that a particular type of identity is going to arise. We all do that. We'll have a lot in common. We'll all be devotees of Krishna. Still different types at the same time, right? So it will give rise to points to a spiritual personality. And this is the work, if you will, of the sadhaka deha, which is a work in progress, because bhakti is very generous, and therefore it doesn't seek qualifications, for example, that yoga or jnana mandate really in order to practice them effectively. Both jnana and yoga, for example, to cite one of the mandates from a traditional point of view, as we find in the Gita, for example, with regard to yoga in the 6th chapter, Astanga Yoga. Well, also with jnana, celibacy is really a one of the is it yam or a niyam? It must be a niyam. Yama of yoga, right? So yama niyama, of course, is the kind of ethical norm. You sit and before you sit, you have to walk and act within the parameters of the yamas and niyamas, and you can sit and so on and so forth. So that's a tall order. And very big in the urban community today. They sure they get around it in their minds in some way, but this is right out of the sutras, right out of the Gita, and so forth. But bhakti is much more generous and much more powerful and capable of doing the work of what to speak of doing the work of sattva guna that yoga and jnana can do. It is from the nirguna. So it doesn't require as much qualification on our part. You're willing to hear that, I'm sure, as it's been told repeatedly by Rupa Goswami, and Nityananda Prabhu himself has said by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, set up a marketplace where the marketing of the holy name, the price for which was your faith, Shraddha. You need faith to do anything. But in bhakti, to have eligibility to tread the path, you need only faith in the efficacy of bhakti. So this is the strength of bhakti. And again, it's nirgun. It's coming from the other side. So it has capacity to take us to the other side. Very generous, very powerful. Is the point? So we have a sadhaka deha consisting of senses, mind, 6 senses, 11 or whatever it is, if you want to include the working senses, arms, legs, and so on and so forth. And employing them in bhakti, Swami is giving so many, I think 64 angas of bhakti. If we carefully study them, you'll see some involve the mind, some involve the tongue for speech, or the tongue for tasting, and physical, mental, verbal angas. It's very consuming. If you look at the whole of it, of course, it's very powerful from another point of view, in that any one of them is comprehensive to bear in due course the fruit of praying, if not in a short time. So by applying ourselves, the point is, in bhakti, in the sadhaka deha, as I'm explaining, this is going to give rise to a personality. As much as applying our senses in relation to sense objects is going to give us a personality of likes and dislikes. I like this, I don't like that. This is hot, this is cold. For you, your hot may be my cold may be your hot, so on and so forth. So similarly, by applying the sadhaka deha, again, in relation to sense objects, the pleasure of Krishna's senses, personality is going to rise out of that. So this is a work in progress because, as I said, bhakti is very generous. So it doesn't seek prior qualification or qualification other than shraddha. So for some of us, it's going to be more of a work in progress than others, depending on our background and previous lives in relation to bhakti, right? If she's very generous, then, she goes to anyone and everyone without seeking qualification. And so the sadhaka deha, then sometimes it's different than in bhakti. When we take diksha, we get a sadhaka deha. Mahaprabhu told us this, Sanatana Goswami. He said, I have many things to do through your body. The sadhaka deha, he said, is chidanandamani. But the diksha kali, atma samarpana, the time of diksha. You get a body, and you do atma samarpana. Apply yourself. Diksha, of course, is more than just, in one sense, receiving the initiation. That's under the auspices, if you will, of sambandha gyan. And when that is complete, then in terms of realization, sambandha gyan, then you're fully equipped, so to speak, to employ yourself in the abhideya, in practice. That is bhav bhakti. But now we're practitioners of sadhana bhakti. Right? And sometimes the point is our senses will be distracted. And sometimes we use our senses. And this is what we're doing when we should think about it in relation to sense objects for the pleasure of our senses, which is continuing to foster a material sense of identity. In Sharanagati, which is really the central focus of sadhana bhakti, whereas loyam or longing is the central focus of bhava bhakti. So there may be obviously going to be some overlapping, but characterized sadhana bhakti is by the pursuit of Sharanagati. This is a theatrical stage on which the drama of bhakti or drama of Krishna lila, let's say, will be performed. We can say, coming to a theater near you soon, in your heart. As soon as you get the stage up, you want the drama to be, the dance to be performed. So that requires a little work, right? On our part, a little effort. Sadhana bhakti feels more like effort, although we couldn't even begin it without grace. So the two are there. Well, sometimes we're using our senses for their own satisfaction, probably not thinking about it. And to that extent, we're fostering material identity. Central, I was talking about Sharanagati. Sharanagati begins with what? Anukulasya sankalpa, partikulasya. Anukul pratikul. So that means with my senses, I may say, I like this, or I may say, I don't like this. In Sharanagati, we say, this is pleasing to Krishna. This is not pleasing to Krishna. I have a new criterion for what's good or bad, happy or sad. And what may make me happy may not initially be pleasing to my senses or mind, which have been going in a different direction since forever. Since forever. But so this is effort, right? It's a new criterion. If you, as much as you can apply yourself in this respect, in Sharanagati, as much as you will rise above what Krishna says in the Gita, second chapter, what does he say? Matra spasastu konte, what we're talking about. Sitoshna sukha dukkara. Agamapa, you don't need this tam sitiksha prabhata. He says, you need a little bit of titiksha, a little bit of tolerance. You have to tolerate that the senses are saying this would be favorable, but Gita, Bhagavad, Sadhu, Guru, Vaishnavi, they're saying otherwise, and it's showing an example. So I make an effort. So it's a work in progress. So long story short here, Sadhaka Day is the Prakat Lila is something like that, because there's a mixture of the material elements and the spiritual elements. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Dham, in his Prakat Lila, Prakat Manifest Lila, there are some other elements. You had Chandakazi, just like in Krishna Prakat Lila, you had the Kamsa and so forth. So what he was teaching, at any rate, in his Sanskrit school, it was a little bewildering to some of the students, and one of the students objected. And he objected to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu more or less ignoring him and uttering gopi, gopi, gopi. We mentioned this, right? The point we made here, which is significant and worth repeating, it's not something that you might not pick up too easily. The point is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu experienced Gopi Bhav in Navadvip. The point that tells us Navadvip is complete. Why did he go to Jagannath Puri then? He went there to show us how to enter into Navadvip through his Acharya Lila as a sadhu, the way to go there. He goes through his public life in Sankirtan, and his public life brings him to private life. It carries him there. The way he conducted himself publicly in Sankirtan, and also in explaining the tattva to the educated class, while the Dinanaguru was of himself, did it to the uneducated people. Persons like Prakashananda Saraswati, Venkata Bhatta, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching them Rup Sanatan, also the Shiksha to them, and so forth. This is his Madhya Lila. Madhya Lila is important to us, most important. It's the central emphasis of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Why? Because it shows us how to enter into Navadvip. Why does Krishnadas Kaviraj repeatedly show deference to Vrindavan Das Thakur? His own work in many respects, is more poetic. It's filled with the teachings of the Goswamis. It's really Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as experienced by Rupa Goswami. That's Chaitanya Charitamrita through the pen of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Mm-hmm. It's a more sophisticated, theologically speaking, text, and also in terms of the way it's written and the number of Sanskrit verses that are cited as praman for almost every point that he raises in Bengali. I mean, he took the Goswami's teachings, which were highly, for highly literate and educated people, Sanskrit commentaries, theology, philosophy, and he took it and turned it into Bengali verses. It's quite a feat. But he repeatedly defers to Vrindavan Das, whose work with respect to the things I've mentioned is not on the same level, but its emphasis is on Navadvip. There we find Vrindavan Das expressing his heart in Chaitanya Bhagavat. That stands out like a red flag, like whoa. Guyamakiti Puchiti. When he said, I see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sitting on the bank of the Ganges with his students. What can I compare this to? What could this be compared to? I could compare it to Brihaspati, the guru of the gods, but he is partial to the gods, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is impartial. I could compare it, maybe he says, to the moon, but the moon has spots, so on and so forth. He goes through a number of things. But he said, but there's one thing I could think of. I could compare it to. Jamuna Puli hai. Along the bank of the Jamuna, where Krishna is seated with his friends, taking a picnic lunch there. This is applicable. This comparison is accurate, and I long to enter there. He says, "This is my ideal." This is the goosebumps, horripilation. See his poetry there, express his feeling. For Navadvip, he's desiring at that point. He's like a half a generation since Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was departed, the last disciple of Nityananda Prabhu. He's longing to enter the Prakat Lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a portal. Obviously, Krishna's Lila Prakat Lila is a portal to the Aprakat Lila. But that's in the mytho-historical realm, not that you can't go there, but if you have any doubts about it, Chaitanya Lila is in the historical era. It happened. It's going to happen again. You could go there. You should go there. Enter there. That is Mahaprabhu's teachings with his example. When he finally enters the Gambhira and under the further tutelage of Ramananda and Krishnadas in his text, and there compares to Subal and Swarup Damodar, whom he compares to Lita Sakhi, helping him to step into the bhav of Radha once and for all. At that point, he's also entering into, showing us from there you will go into Navadvip. There you can enter into the Kirtan hall of Srivas, and during the Kirtan I can say to you, no, you are so-and-so. See me, I am Krishna. Who are you? So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami repeatedly defers to Vrindavan Das. So he's talked about the Prayojan, Navadvip Leelas. I'm just talking about the Madhya Leela, but it's very important to us. It's not something that's very popular, is the point, in Navadvip. The Madhya Leela, as we talked about last night, that's not a popular idea for everybody in Navadvip. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will take sannyas. This is just absolutely unimaginable. And he's taking sannyas only a few months. Nityananda Prabhu arrived in July, on the day before Guru Purnima, 1509 in our common era. And in January, February of 1510, Mahaprabhu left to take sannyas. When Nityananda Prabhu arrived, everyone was in place. Everything was in place. The devotees in Nadia, Chand Kazi is defeated in this period and so forth. The life could not be better. Nimai Pandit become a Vaishnava. This other mad extension of himself, not different from Balaram, is present. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed the divinity of Advaita. And all the Vaishnavas, what company they're in, they're thinking, they're flashing between, he's Krishna. How could he be Krishna? Where are his associates? We're his associates. Are we his associates? Is he Krishna? They're going back and forth like this, through kirtan, in and out, into the samadhi of the Braj Lila, back out again into Gaura Lila. These two are just inseparable. Which one comes first? First the giver, then the gift. Well, that's one way of thinking about it. We entered into our discussion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila, of course, through the Bhagavatam, first there, then. So one lotus within the other lotus. Sweta Dweep Dham. What is it? Navadweep Nam. No, Sweta Dweep Nam, Navadweep Gram, he says, Vrindavan Das. Sweta Dweep is the in this context is within the lotus of Gokul in Golok, where the Parakiya Leelas of Krishna, human-like Krishna. No Aishvarya outside of that. Within Goloka, there may be Swakiya and so forth, other possibilities. But this is not our ideal or destination. Within there, like we can see on Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, he designed that originally, the graphic. And if you look you came with the first canto, I think in 2 or 3 volumes, and the BBT, his book trust, then did another edition of that for the first 3 volumes. It's blue, like a blue kind of sky idea. And there's all these planets, lokas of Vishnu, and then there's a lotus in the center, and there's Radha and Krishna. What else do you see? Look closely at the graphic, you'll see behind Radha and Krishna, there's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performing Sankirtan. Sweta Dweep Nam Navadweep Gram. The village of Navadweep, he's saying, on earth. That is Sweta Dweep. So, go there. In Navadweep, after Nityananda Prabhu was arrived and so forth, nothing could be. Navadweep is now complete. The entire uppercut realm is manifest here, and suddenly, we're just within a few months. Even though every day is as long as Brahma's, if you will, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to be, not only to leave, he's going to take sannyas. So even if you were to follow him, which some devotees did, and of course others did, year after year coming, still the sannyas is creating some distance. It's not that comfortable to sit up here, to be honest with you, but that's part of the frustrations, right? You can't get as close. I'm telling you from my side, it's not as comfortable as you think. You got the bigger seat up there. We shouldn't think like that. That might be more comfortable. It's half and half. Listeners and the speakers. You can't have one without the other. Someone told me the other day, I think I'm going to become a guru. I said, well, does anybody else agree with you? That would be a good start. Why don't we look there? Anybody else think like that? So anyway, perfect it was in Navadweep, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going to take sannyas. So this is like like lightning has struck the hearts of everyone. And of course, now we're at the point where he hasn't revealed it. He's just perceiving it. He's chanting gopi, 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 point being again. Navadvipi, he's already experiencing. We have to go into this. This is very interesting, but going ahead, we'll talk a little bit more about this. The completion, the complete nature, if you will, of Navadvip lila in terms of the bhavas that Mahaprabhu is tasting, particularly the Radha Bhav. But the student doesn't understand. So he says, why are you chanting gopi, gopi, gopi? You should chant Krishna Nam. And that will bring you piety. So what's happening here in the statement of the student is he's advocating Nam Aparad. And unless we can overcome Nam Aparad, we can stop committing aparads by understanding them and the implications of them, well, then we cannot attain any bhav, right? This is the way shown by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through Nam. So the student is saying, what is a Nam Aparad? But why you should chant Nam, because then you're going to get piety. This is bhakti covered by karma. Think I'll do bhakti, and that will make me more pious, more qualified to tread the Dharma marg. It's a different path altogether, bhakti. That's kind of steps on the head, if you will, of varnashram, which is a moral and ethical aspect of religion, rather than a spiritual, experiential path, mystical, right? Otherworldly. So to think that the name, chanting the name, for example, is equal to other Vedic rituals within the Karma Kanda section. No, this is not Karma Kanda. This is not Gyan Kanda. What Kanda is it? Kevala Ananda Kanda. Is this Kevala Ananda? Only joy, only bliss. This is the path, the happy path. So Mahaprabhu is taking exception, first of all, to his Nam Aparad, which contradicts the whole teaching that he embodies in terms of his setting example as to the efficacy of Nam. During the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was a kind of a revolution throughout India against the idea, the kind of monopoly of the Smartas, who were the Brahminical class in the Advaitin school of Vedanta, which taught that in order to attain mukti, union with God, that you would have to be born in the Brahmin family and take sannyas. The common people are, they're at least 2 steps away, right? And they're big steps. They got to take another birth as a Brahmin. In that life, they got to take sannyas and so forth. So they just felt, and rightfully so, God is really more accessible than that. We should be able to have some direct communion with God. And so there were many persons, saints, sadhus in India advocating that through Nam, through the name of God, you can have direct communication with God. Forget that priest over there. So, you have Tukaram, you have Kabir, you have Guru Nanak at the same time. You met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sikhs, like Satnam, they're fixing met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. Most of them, of course, are advocating not Nirguna Nam. They're advocating that by Nam, you can attain mukti, and then you'll be silent there. Mahaprabhu, of course, is teaching the Nam is Nirguna. So the way and the goal are the same, right? The sadhana and the sadhya are the same. So when he heard this fellow saying, chant, and you'll get the kind of results, karmic results that you would get from this kind of sacrifice or that kind of ritual in the karma mark, gyan or karma kanda. This was contrary to everything that Mahaprabhu was here to teach, if you will. And then this is on the one side, because he's teaching the Dharma for the age. On the other side, of course, he's there for internal reasons, and he's tasting Gopi Bhav in his own inner life, which is coming out. He's witnessing some part of the romantic comedy, if you will, of Krishna lila, and the debates and the very charming back and forth between the gopis and Krishna, and he's taking the gopi side, gopi. That's all we can say. I'm taking the gopi side here. And the other guy's coming and saying, you should take Krishna's side. So he's upset with that from that point of view also. So after thinking about coming to his senses and seeing the reaction of the Brahman, who went and told other students, this my Pandit, he's gone crazy, and so on and so forth. He thought, I came to give a remedy, but what I'm complicating and the problem. Rather than remedying the problem, I'm fostering the problem. I have to do something about it. This is then where we began to think I should take sannyas, which, as I said the other day, creates a teachable moment. I mentioned the first time I went to Calcutta in 1973, it was like a sea of white dhotis, men shopping, working, commerce, and so forth. You won't see that now. But imagine in that sea of white cloth, one person in a saffron cloth would just stand out like a sore thumb or something, like a light, like a luminary, right? So in the tradition, then it would just the uniform itself would create a teaching moment. So Mahaprabhu, this is very artificial for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's really a family affair. And but anyway, we'll see how some of the devotees reacted to that. Gaura Pandit in particular comes to mind in this regard. He took exception to this philosophically. But the first person that Mahaprabhu then conveyed his thoughts to was Nityananda Prabhu, his other self. He said, I will shave off my sika and give up my thread. By that he meant, I will take sannyas. Nityananda Prabhu's reaction was immediately to think of Sachi. What will your mother do? He's saying, what will mom do? Because he is the brother of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What does he say? Prajananandana Jay Sachi Sutta Harilashte Balaram Haridovitai. Krishna and Balaram coming together as Gaura and Nityananda Prabhu. So this was very difficult for Nityananda Prabhu to digest. After all, by this time, the father of the house of course, Nityananda Prabhu had left home. That's another story, right? He had left home. He was about a dozen years older than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, wandering, traveling. He came to Navadvip, joined the group, and so forth. And from that point on, it was apparent. He's like a brother. He said, stay in the house of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Sachi, in a dream, saw them. She had the deity of Krishna Balaram, which is mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat, in her home, that she would worship. And in the dream, she saw Gaura and Nityananda come in and throw them off the altar and put themselves up on the altar. She was startled by the dream. Right? So by this time, as I say, Jagannath Mishra, who is the Nanda Maharaj of Gaur Lila, has left the world. We'll have to talk about why, but the point being, in the absence of the father, well, the elder brother will take the role of the father. What will your mother think? Nityananda Ram. This is naturally thinking and hearing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's plan. regardless of how good the plan is, or in the larger picture, if you will, or the smaller picture, however you want to think about it, of the Yuga Dharma and so forth, from the feelings that we want to be acquainted with, Balaram, Nityanandaram is thinking like this. And then Mukunda was the favorite kirtanier. And here you play, well, if you do this, well, we come with us, at least stay for a few more days to do kirtan. And of course, he took ultimately Nityananda with him. He took Mukunda with him, his kirtanier. He told it to, it was intimated to Gadadhar Pandit, who was the childhood friend of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just maybe a year younger than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But they were very, very close through their whole life. Of course, once he became possessed of Krishna praying and a danger to his own self in some ways, Sachimata had put Gadadhar in charge. You stay with him always, protect him from his madness. When Mahaprabhu told Gadadhar Pandit, he said, "What kind of philosophy is this? That you will get love of Krishna by shaving your sika, taking off your thread? The householders cannot attain bhakti. Householders cannot attain prem." He starts citing great householders, devotees, even Shiva is married. Odd one, but married. And so many. But so this according to their natures, they're responding. He's Gadadhar Pandit. He's the Bhagavatam speaker in Gaura Lila. Every morning in the house of Sachi, he's reciting Bhagavatam, and in Jagannath Puri at the Gopi, again reciting Bhagavatam. We want to go to that class, right? Of course, it's mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavata that repeatedly he would speak from the Dhruva Lila and Prahlad Charit, especially Prahlad Charit. I mean, you have to understand that chapter and imbibe that, digest that, to fully understand what is the Brajavima, but the selflessness, that is to say, of Prahlad, the end of selfishness, that is Prahlad Maharaj. That's another lecture, but Gadadhar Pandit responded in this way. And then Murari Gupta, the older physician, a Sanskrit writer, he was also, of course, Mahaprabhu informed him. Mahaprabhu informed that he had a dream, and in the dream, a Brahmin gave him a mantra, and he didn't like it at all. It's a famous dictum of the Upanishads, Tattvamasi. He said, in this mantra, my love disappears. This is the Advaitin understanding. It's the Mahavakya from the Advaitin perspective, and the sannyas mantra that Shankar promoted and his successive acharya's impart. And so if the conception behind it in that school, of course, is a radical form of non-dualism. So there's no other. So God in that school is provisional as far as his person that disappears. This is a very, very shallow idea. You think about it. It's been compared to deep sleep. If you think that's bliss, well, it might feel good after you get up, but that's what there's no bliss. There's no suffering. It's very Buddhistic, end suffering. That's the focus. You can call ending suffering pleasurable. Well, in comparison to suffering, it is, but if there's no experience whatsoever, there's no experience. There's no. It's content-less consciousness, if that makes sense. Content-less consciousness. There's nothing to be conscious of, not even yourself. This really should be played out and underscored. There's a whole lot of dancing around that's done in the advocacy of Advaita Vedanta that kind of hides this point, what it culminates in. If you just talk about what it culminates in, I would rather have loved imperfectly and lived imperfectly than not to live at all in the name of ending suffering. Better to love imperfectly than not to love at all. It's a no loving. It's love is an illusion. Mahaprabhu's doctrine is the doctrine of love. It's prem is the prayojan, right? Prem prayojan. Jai. So he wrote me recently. So so Tattvamasi, he said, I heard this mantra and it's like it was a nightmare. My dream was a nightmare. So Murari Gupta told me, no, he could understand what he was talking about, although he didn't mention the mantra. He said, you should think of it like this. You are his. You belong to him. And this is another grammatical and a better grammatical explanation of the dictum, of the mandate of the sutra. Tattvamasi, you are his. Mahaprabhu like that. Yes, I am his. The scripture is saying you are his. You belong to him. This is Jivara Swarupoi, Krishna Jidas. You belong to Krishna. This is what you're for. You exist for this purpose. Mahaprabhu liked this. And then he told, Brari could understand, he will take sannyas. He will leave. When it became apparent that, and Mahaprabhu confirmed, and the concern rippled throughout the community, to his mother, who brought up the subject, or with regard to his mother, I should say, he replied, I will come, first of all, I will never leave you, all of you. It only appears that I will leave. I will come again, he said, in the form of the earth and in the form of my name. So he said, the earth means the deity. In the form of the deity, he's saying, I'll come again in two forms. What he means there in Chaitanya Bhagavat is that you can make a deity of me and worship me in this way. That's not as common as you might think. So it's a big thing. And then he said, and my name, Gaura, and I'll be present in my name. After all, I'm Krishna, is the implication. So in another lila, and here you are, my associates, and so forth. So he conveyed this to his mother, to others, and of course, ultimately he had to speak to Vishnupriya. That's very poetically described in Chaitanya Mangal of Lochanas Thakur. Now, that's an important topic because Vishnupriya is the consort, the wife of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when we enter into Navadvip and Dasya Bhakti, there will be Gaura, Vishnupriya will be there, Lakshmi Priya will be there also. I think Gauranga Priya asked, well, why don't we worship Gaura and Vishnupriya? And I replied, of course, we do. Chaitanya Bhaktivinoda Thakur established the deity of Gaura Vishnupriya in the Yogapit, in Navadvip, birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But why don't we have deities of Gaura Vishnupriya everywhere? Well, because we have, in contrast to that, deities of Gaura Gadadhar. So, point is that for Archan in Vaidhi Marg, there is the worship of Gaura Vishnupriya. Rag Marg, Madhurya Rasa, is the worship of Gaura Gadadhar, because Gadadhar is the Radha of Gaura Lila, and Vishnupriya is the Bhushakti, so the Vaikuntha expansion, if you will, of Sri Radha, the primal Shakti. This means, of course, in Navadvip, there's Vaidhi Bhakti going on. Everybody worships Vishnupriya and Mahaprabhu. Because there's Vaidhi Bhakti going on in Krishna Lila. Right? Who is the deity in the house of Nanda Maharaj? Bhagavan Narasingha. Madhumangal is the Pujari. They're doing Vaidhi Bhakti there. Of course, they're like us. They're not able to pay much attention to their attentions on their children, Krishna and Balaram and Radha. We heard Yasoda considers to be her own daughter. Right? This morning we heard it. So there's some sense of Vaidhi Bhakti there, and in the context of that, Vishnu Priya herself is worshiping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is internally pursuing, relishing the Braj Lila, Braj Rasa. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, we find the Braj Rasa, which is the central focus of Navadvip. So Bhakti Vinod, for example, when he worshipped Gadadhar. But Vishnu Priya Devi Kejai. Right? Now there are some people who say, some Vaishnavas in Navadvip who say, we forget Radharani. We don't know how to say it, but we just worship Gaura Vishnu Priya. So this is not something that it is a form of worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that is not endorsed in Chaitanya Charitamrita or in Chaitanya Bhagavad. So there are all kinds of ideas out there, all kinds of worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but we follow Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Vrindavan Das Thakur, we follow Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and so forth. So, point is what? Vishnu Priya doesn't replace Radharani, she's Bhushakti. Appearing in a special Leela, no doubt. But even she is worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told her, why are you upset tonight? She didn't say anything, she just looked at him. She knew tonight is the night he will leave. So he very sweetly talked to her, and he ultimately told her, in this Leela, you and I have come again. This is another Leela that we're in. And in this Leela, our Leela, is to cry for the Jiva souls. See, and he showed himself, his four arms. I am Narayan. You are Lakshmi. You are my Bhushakti. He brought some Aishwarya into the picture. Make it possible for her to acquiesce to his request. And so he left that night, right? Just late, or early morning before the sunrise, heading for Katwa. According to Murari Gupta, Keshava Bharati, who became his sannyas guru, had already come to Navadvip earlier. He had the darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Just by seeing him, he had already been converted without realizing it. And his own mantra wasn't working the way he thought it should. It was creating a different experience that he wasn't quite sure about. So Mahaprabhu had arranged this, and then he planned to go to Katwa and receive the initiation from Sandipani Muni. Sandipani Muni is one of the gurus of Krishna, from whom Krishna received Diksha, his Upanai, his Brahman thread, and so forth in Avanti, means outside of Vrindavan. When he went to Mathura, after staying there for some time, then his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, said, well, you're here, you got to get an education. So he and Balaram were sent to Sandipani Muni. Sandipani Muni and Gaura led as Keshav Bharati, appearing again. I say one of his gurus because Guru Shishya, Ami Shishya, Guru Nata. Guru Nata. This is the Prema Vidyalai. Prema Vidyalai. The dancing of Radha. Krishna says, Ami Shishya, Guru Nata. And her dancing is my guru. Radhikar Premera Unmata. And her praying is making me mad. So now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to leave Navadvip, right? To start his Madhya Lila, takes sannyas from Keshava Bharati, from Sandipani Muni, and start his teaching Lila. And he's going there to, at the same time, further instruct Keshava Bharati, to whom he asked, as the ceremony was about to commence, is this the mantra that you will give me? Tattvamasi, right? And hearing it from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the conception of you are his, Keshav, everything made sense to Keshava Bharati. Ever since I met this fellow, nothing's made sense. My mantra isn't working right. Now I understand what it is. There's actually something to do in transcendence. There's another, that which is everywhere, and omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, is moving and doesn't know everything, needs to be schooled. I schooled him. I'm his guru. I'm Sandipani Muni. This is the same. All these things came into him. The grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just by uttering the mantra into his ear. He fainted. Everyone else fainted. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began a kirtan, right? And off he went, right? To go to Vrindavan. Of course, he was waylaid by Nityananda Prabhu, who tricked him into thinking that he had already arrived at Vrindavan. And then brought him to the house of Advaita. Meanwhile, he had sent Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar, very important figure in Gaura Lila. Nanda Maharaj had said it, or excuse me, Jagannath Mishra had passed away, right? So Chandrasekhar was like an uncle to him. So he became like the father for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Very, very close and affectionate relationship. He was sent by Mahaprabhu to Keshava Bharati, got what to tell him that Nimai Pandit is coming there to take sannyas, and he arranged things. And Nityananda Prabhu sent him back to Navadvip to tell everybody, I've got him here in Shantipur at Advaita's place. Let everyone come. Everyone except Vishnu Priya. We're worshiping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We should follow her example. We should worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu like she did. She's the feminine Haridas Thakur, Namacharya. She's the feminine Namacharya. Namacharyi, I don't know. But in his absence, then, you know the story, she chanted Krishna Nam, Mahamantra. With every mantra, she took a grain of rice, took it from the bag and put it in a clay pot. She chanted from morning to 3 p.m. The rice that was there, the grains of rice, then she would cook with, offer them to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to the deity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that she herself fashioned, so to speak, because when the deity was crafted by the artisans, they brought it before her to get her approval. One time, she didn't say anything. They went back and they worked on it again. Second time, still didn't get a rise out of her. Third time, she's very shy. She's only 14 years old. 14 or 15. She shyly covered her face like this. And they were also not innocent. Dameshwar Mahaprabhu is the deity. Here he is. Mahaprabhu. This is her deity. So she would offer the rice to the deity. And she was taking heart to heart also. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you can find me in my name or in Krishna Nam. So her example of chanting is extraordinary. Many, many years ago, when I first moved independently of ISKCON, if you will, but not independently at all, which is an interesting thought, because we were thought, those of us who did so, come under the tutelage, the shelter, the guidance of Sridhar Maharaj, to be independent, not under the board. I was once listening with Sudhir Goswami Maharaj to a talk of Pujyapat Sridhar Maharaj. He was talking about Mirabai, and in Mirabai's songs, there's no mention of anybody else, just Krishna. There's no mention of Radha or Yashoda or Nanda. the Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj was saying, this is a different Krishna than we're talking about. Our Krishna cannot be without all these associates and Jamuna and Govardhan and so on and so forth. And I said, this is just so authorized. Swami Maharaj said, yeah, that's what I was thinking. We're authorized. We're not independent here. We've got a what do you call it? An udder or an oar or a rudder. We've got a rudder. We've got an udder too. Like cows at Odori's got a infection in her udder now. So dealing with that. Shama Kijai. She's been milking for like 10 years. Got without a calf. So, what's the point? So, so Vishnu Priya. So we have to answer your question. Yeah, we worship Vishnu Priya. Anyway, years ago when I moved independently of ISKCON, of the auspices of Sridhar Maharaj, I started a magazine. It was when the term New Age first came out. It was like in the 80s, and desktop publishing was the thing. We started publishing this magazine. I named it Clarion Call, which is a term. It's a British term, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used it to refer to the flute call of Krishna at the end of the Gita, Dharma, Sarva Dharma, Vritta Jamamekam. And so it was just amazing because before that, it was like to get published was a big thing. You had to be somebody, you had to write something that was really worth publishing. But with desktop publishing, that changed everything. We had this magazine, and so we had advertisements in it. And then we would just book all these people self-publishing would send us books for review. It was such garbage, so much of it. I was at stacks and stacks of it, just start a fire, Just terrible stuff. Real shame. But at any rate, I did an article on the widows of Vrindavan. So I interviewed the widows of Vrindavan, all of them Bengalis who lost their husbands, and they go to Vrindavan from Navadvip and Nadia and retire there. And so I interviewed the leading head of this particular ashram, which was the biggest ashram of women. So in interviewing her, I asked her, do you have like a patron saint? She didn't know what I meant, but I said, well, we were nearby the Mirabai temple. It's a little temple, like Mirabai. She said, oh, no. And she understood what I was saying. She said, Vishnu Priya.
No.
Oh, and I thought, am I dumb or what? This lady's enlightening me, so I'm so fortunate to be in her company. Vishnu Priya Devi. There anyway, in Shantipur at Veda's house, everyone came. Mother Sachi came. Right? Now, why did Jagannath Mishra leave? That's the question earlier. Why did in the Lila, why did he depart? In Krishna Lila, Nanda Maharaj took the responsibility of bringing, along with Akrura, but to chaperoning Krishna and Balaram on the way to Mathura. And he managed to pacify Yashoda Mai enough that the chariot could proceed, right? And his promise was that he would bring everybody back, Krishna and Balaram back, I should say, very, very quickly. It's going to be just a short outing and he will be back. Well, it took a little longer than that. And at one point, Krishna had to tell Nanda Maharaj that you will have to go back, and you friends of mine, his friends, of course, went with him, his cowherd friends, to Mathura, to witness the wrestling match, of course, which is at Yudhavira, that wrestling, amongst friends anyway, is very central to Sakya Rasa, very favorable, friendly rasa, compatible with Sakya Rasa. So Krishna and Balaram going to wrestle in Navadvip, it's not something to miss from their point of view. So they were there and they saw the slaying of Kuvalyapita, and they saw the conversion of the they saw the what is it called? A type of Madhurya. Not Samanjasa. Sadarani Madhurya Kubja. She had an ordinary love for Krishna. It's very odd. And he accepted it. And they saw the tailor who was carrying the king's clothes, and Krishna and Balaram said, that's what you got there. We're in the kingdom here. We're dressed like cowbirds. I think we should be wearing royal attire. We're going to the wrestling match. No, this is for the king. Oh, is it? For the more then. I'm Rasaraj. They took the clothing and dealt with the unfavorable response of the tailor, to the delight of all the friends with whom they also distributed the king's clothes. Dressed up like them, and they're all looking like little princes themselves as they entered into the wrestling arena. And of course, the two wrestlers, Janura and Mystique, they were defeated by Krishna. Kamsa was defeated, and so forth. So the main task was over, and in the sense that Devaki and Vasudeva were freed from the prison and so forth. But now their parental affection was coming to the fore, and they were city people. Nanda Maharaj is a country bumpkin comparatively, and they pulled the wool over his eyes. They said, "Your son is here. I mean, don't you want him to have an education? Here he is in the big city. We've got universities here," and so forth. Sandipani Bhumi, just like they convinced him, and of course Kamsa had been slain, and then Jarasandh, whose what daughters were the wives of Kamsa. He was a great military person and aggressive, and he could have come storming into Vrindavan. So Krishna said, I think I need to stay here and deal with some of the implications, the ramifications of the passing of my uncle, Kamsa, as he looked at it. Nanda Maharaj was convinced. He was not happy, but he couldn't refute the logic of Krishna, with the implication of which was Krishna would have to stay on, and Nanda would have to go back. Now Nanda Maharaj had a hard enough time convincing Mother Yasoda to just relax, I'll bring him back, and everybody else. Everybody in Braj, depending on Nanda Maharaj, he'll bring him back. Now Nanda Maharaj has to go back without him. How do you think he will feel? How will everybody respond to that? This is a very trying situation for him. I've written a little something about this. I think it might be time to read it, just briefly, if you permit me. Although not pleased with Krishna's logic for remaining in Mathura for an extended period, Nanda Baba nonetheless knew that it was well-reasoned and with concern for the well-being of everyone in Vrindavan in mind. After all, Krishna had just rid the earth of the evil and powerful King Kamsa, and those seeking revenge could wreak havoc in Vrindavan should he immediately return there. Thus, Nanda Baba could understand that it would be safer for Krishna to stay in Mathura, where he could surely defeat such persons and protect the village from any collateral damage. Nonetheless, all Nanda could do and say in response was beat his forehead and tearfully blurt out, "Your mother will be opposed. How will I make her understand?" Krishna told his father that he would write to her himself. Sitting down, he wrote her a letter on the spot and gave it to his dear friend Sridham to deliver. Sridham, his voice choked up, then read the letter aloud, in which Krishna explained that he was still present in Vrindavan and that Yasoda's experience of him in dreams was actual. Indeed, he said that he was eating or cooking daily, and to convince her, he related the preparations that she had been making, although with no appetite to eat them herself. He told her to eat, or he himself would fast. This, in turn, caused Nanda to ask about Krishna's friends. But how will your friends, who also depend on you, love, and maintain their lives. Krishna replied, and the friends are there. Like my mother, all my dear friends can also experience my presence through spurtis of me. It means like hallucinations of me, but he says, but unlike my mother, who will only see me in dreams, my sakas, because of the pranay, will experience me while they are awake. You see, there's a difference, of course, between Sakirasa in this regard and Vatsalya rasa and Madhurya rasa, because in Sakirasa is based on trust and confidence and equality. They have no doubt about Krishna's love. Every cowherd boy thinks that Krishna loves me the most, and every one of them is right. But in Vatsalya rasa, there's some doubt, especially when your kids start to grow up. Do they love me? And in Vatsalya, in the Madhurya rasa, also the question is there, especially when your lover, Krishna, is a little bit flirtatious. So there's some doubt in their love. Therefore, they cannot be satisfied with the spurtis of Krishna, these mystical appearances of Krishna in Vrindavan. They can't be convinced that it's real. It doesn't work the same for them as it does with the cowherd boys. This is just a theological point here to interject. So this is how I'll deal with my sakas. They will see me when they're awake. Yashoda will see me in dreams. What about your cows? Nanda said. Like your friends, will the cows be able to directly experience you? Krishna replied, I will use another method to give them the experience of my ongoing presence. Cows operate more by smell and sound than they do sight, although they discern also by form. Stoka Krishna means little Krishna, it's the name of one of his friends. Looks like him, but he's a little smaller. Should wrap himself in my cloth, laden with my fragrance, and play the flute. Subal should dress in Balaram's blue cloth and take his horn. Then they should sit among the cows. With a display of affection, he gave Stoka Krishna and Subal, who were endowed with his own qualities, his clothing filled with the scent of his limbs, and decorated them properly with his own ornaments. Then, pulling Subal aside, he also gave him a message to deliver to the gopis. He told them that only a shadow-like form of himself plays in Mathura, while his actual form plays in Braj. A person is present in that place in which he is mentally absorbed, while that person's physical presence is but a shadow of himself appearing elsewhere. In his private message to the young Braja gopis, he also reassured them of this truth by revealing that he was aware in detail of what took place when they each individually experienced spurtis of him in his apparent absence since coming to Mathura. Krishna then turned to Madhu Mangal with affection and said, oh, you also go as my representative. Since I have unexpectedly left, serve Purnamasi to ensure auspiciousness for me and make everyone happy as before, whom Madhu Mangal is, of course, related to. Then, looking at the servants and the young boys lacking discriminating power, all of whom stood in silence with lowered heads alongside Nanda, Krishna cheerfully said, since they are all affectionate like my friends and my father, these servants and young boys should follow them. Then Nanda departed as Krishna, overwhelmed by feelings of impending separation, turned toward the city, while Balaram followed Nanda and the others as far as he could, bidding farewell before returning to the capital with the sagacious encouragement of Nanda Baba to follow and care for his younger brother. Fearing that his separation from Krishna would be a cause of further suffering, Balaram took leave of everyone with determination, and on meeting his brother, sought out a solitary spot. There, they each embraced each other and wept together. What more can be described? Jiva Goswami writes, remembering Krishna, Balaram, Nanda, and the cowherds, Sridham and his friends, my mind gives up everything because of the pain, fearing further separation. As Shelley says, the sweetest tales are those that tell of saddest times. Read and weep, O Gopapinda Paul. O beloved Sakras, your story of mutual love, both union and separation, burns a deep impression in my heart. And this assures me I will one day attain, well, that part I didn't mean, it's not part of it, but it is. So these are the, just to give you some idea of Nanda Maharaj's plight. He's going to come back to the village and he has to come without Krishna and Balaram. Of course, when he does, everybody in Braj sees that he is bearing the burden of each of them. Each one is bearing his own burden or her own burden of separation from Krishna. But they realize Nanda is bearing the burden of himself as well as everybody else. And so they just, obviously, they're not upset with him. They think he's in worse condition than us. He couldn't go through this again in another lila. Therefore, Jagannath Mishra left early. The burden fell on his shoulder herself. You have to take it. Sachimati was brought to Advaita Bhavan, to Saptagram, I should say. There was a son. He was head shaven, wearing saffron cloth as a sannyasi, 24 years old, which is typically the thing someone does at 50 or 60 years old. And there, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, somehow in some madness I did this. Mom. I put myself entirely in your hand. You tell me what to do. Not exactly, but this is where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deviates from the Dharma of the sannyas at the onset here. But she couldn't allow him to be a object of criticism on the part of sadhus. She couldn't allow that. That would be more painful for her, even than losing his company, such as a selfless love. And so she, of course, came up with a solution to the problem of sorts, because he wanted to go to Vrindavan. That's very long distance from Navadvip. She said, Puri is like another room in the same house to Navadvip. So go there where there's always commerce back and forth between Jagannath Puri and Navadvip. We'll hear about you. Your devotees will hear about you. We can send messages to you and so forth. And so it was. And this is the beginning. This Madhya Lila. We will go with Mukunda, Nityananda, Gadadhar Pandit, and so forth. On the way to Puri. We'll have to take that up in the next discussion. Srimad Mahaprabhu ki jai. Acharya Lila. Oh, Premanande. Any question? What's the time?
7:52.
Yes.
Maharaj, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to Brigopad's Navadvip Bharatam class, and he was talking about this Vishnu Priya lamenting for 80 years. She was worshipping Mahaprabhu apparently. Is there any stories anywhere else that you know of that we could refer to?
You could probably find more about that in Bhakti Ratnakar. I would suggest that. Bhakti Ratnakar. There are other texts that are out there that are advocating the kind of worship of Vishnu Priya that is not embraced by Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami and the regular Orthodox idea of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So keep that in mind if you're looking on the internet, something about Vishnu Priya. Maybe ask first, but Bhakti Ratnakar. Yes.
You mentioned, I think, Guru Nanak and
Yeah. Kabir.
Kabir. So their ultimate goal was in person.
Yeah, they would. Yeah. Chant the name and attain mukti. I mean, Kabir, I don't think he's really articulated in any theological or philosophical details. Idea, but Guru Nanak certainly did. see Krishna. Yes.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a verse that describes how one can, or he himself is thinking of Lord Chaitanya in Godroom in the mood of Gopa Bhava amidst the Gopas.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering in that like visualization, Lord Nityananda is there, and a sadhaka would be associating with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda. But if the sadhaka also aspires to associate with Gadadhar Pandit and hear his classes, that's also available.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You have to enter the Gaura Lila also, right? Where we hear the discourse of, is Nityananda Prabhu going to the discourse of Gadadhar Pandit? Of course. So if you want to follow him, then he'll invite you to the class, for sure. Yeah, that's everyday affair. So hear the Bhagavad from Gadadhar Pandit. What else? Yes.
Raj, if it's not too long on the subject, could you say something about Danda Bengali?
That's coming next. On the way forward. I know something about that. Robert said something about it's not an interesting point, but we'll bring it up going forward. All right. Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Govinda ki jai. Panchakalpatru Yascha Vasudeva Kirtanam Bhagavatam.
Jai.
My offenses.
So we're gonna have Gaura Artik now. Before that, I just want to say a quick announcement. The schedule tomorrow has been changed slightly. So there isn't going to be a morning program here at 8 a.m. And the evening class has been switched to a 10:30 class in Raleigh at the Giriraj Mandir Subha Mahamantra's home.
Thank you very much, everyone. Ananga Manjari, thank you. You were able to hear okay? You were smiling a lot, so she's getting it. She's getting it. Yeah, that was great. You did a good job. Thank you so much. What time did she say tomorrow? She said. Okay. I thought she said something like 10:30.
Yeah, Archana, 10:30.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So have to make some adjustments. All right. Jai, good to see everybody. Thank you. And we'll see everyone tomorrow for Q&A, I guess. Haribol.